Greetings, my friends. Turn to Lesson 21 and see how's a grammar for Biblical Hebrew, Lesson 21. We really get two things in Lesson 21. We get a little revisiting of this jussive thing. The jussive, you'll recall, we encountered, I think, in Lesson 18 for the first time. Jussive and cohortative type forms. Yektov could mean he, most likely means he will write. Yektov, but could also mean something like, may he write, okay? If you flip back to page 209 really quick, page 209, you see the first biblical example on the page, 209, letter B. Yishpot Adonai beini uvenecha. May Yahweh judge between me and you. That's the jussive. So we revisit the jussive, and we find out that the jussive form is not just identical to the call. Turns out, another plot twist in the grammar, that the jussive is actually a separate form altogether, and by an historical accident of grammar, it just so happens that the jussive form looks the same as the imperfect in most forms, but not in a couple. In third hey verbs, the jussive and the imperfect are not the same, and this is where you see, in fact, that the jussive is different. Same is true for middle weak verbs. So if you look on page 235 and on page 236, you'll see a chart which gives you tons of examples. So page 235a, the root bana, he builds or he built. In the imperfect, yivne, he will build. In the vav consecutive, vayivin, and he built. And the jussive is not yivne, like the imperfect, but rather is yivin. In fact, a funny thing that you're going to find out is that the vav consecutive actually seems to use the jussive form, not the imperfect form. How do we know? Well, for the strong verbs like katav and shamar, we don't know. It's just yishmor and vayishmor. However, when you get to these third hey verbs, you can see that in every case, and you can look down the list. In every case, the jussive form is the same as what we find in the vav consecutive, and not the imperfect. So look at haya. The imperfect is yehyeh. The vav consecutive should be something like vayehyeh or something like that, but it's not. It's vayhi, just like the jussive, yahi. Same with Allah, ascend. The imperfect, ya'aleh. The vav consecutive is vaya'al. And look at the jussive, ya'al, let him go up. Do you see how that works? So just a little thing to get your mind around, okay? Page 236, same deal, with some vowel changes with the middle weak. So take a verb like room, whom, exalt, he exalts, something like that. He is exalted. Yahum, he will be exalted. Vayaram, and he exalted, or was exalted. Excuse me. Vayaram, Yarom, let him be exalted. Okay, jussive. You see how that works? And you get all kinds of examples. He then gives some cohortatives, call cohortative of weak verbs. Don't get too wrapped up about that. But do remember what the cohortative was, right? It's those first person, either common or singular or common plural forms, which have the hey on the end. So not just amod, I will stand. Emda, let me stand. Okay, and it has this let me or may I kind of nuance to it in translation. And you can see some of the details there. So there's that. Okay, that's thing number one. Thing number two here is this thing we're going to call the imperative. Or the command form. We could use the phrase command form or imperative. I think in parsing we should probably use the term imperative, okay, because that's the standard way. How do you tell somebody just to keep or write or kill or do something like that, just commanding? We have a form like this in English, take the word write. We say write, okay, write, exclamation point, do it, He writes, he has written, he wrote, but write is a kind of specific form, commanding someone to do the writing. Hebrew has this too. One way you can think of it, how to make a command form in Hebrew or an imperative, is you take the imperfect form and just chop off the beginning, okay? So tiktol, chop off the t, and what do you get? Ketol. Kill, okay? Now it turns out that you could only do that with the second person forms, and that's how you get masculine and feminine, and plural for both masculine and feminine also. So ketol, kitli, kill, you're commanding a female. Kitlu, you're commanding a group of men or a mixed crowd. Katolna, You're commanding plural female. The female plural command form imperative is actually pretty rare. It's actually pretty rare. Okay. So he gives you on the middle of page 237, 3A, a list of command forms with shamar as an example, also shakav. Shamor, shimri, shimru, and shimona. This is an example where the masculine forms are pretty dominant. You'll see a feminine singular and more rarely a feminine plural, but mostly the form is shamor and shimru. Okay, that's what you get. You already have met an imperative form, if you're in the class with me, because I've had you reciting the Shema in Deuteronomy 6:4. Shema Yisrael. That word Shema with the Shiva under the Shin, Shema, that's an imperative, a call, masculine, singular imperative. Shema. Okay. Listen, hear. Okay. And then all the nonsense you expect with the gutturals and so on. You can't just put a Shiva under there. Okay. Page 238, you get some forms with the third hey, all kinds of stuff. And he's got all kinds of notes there, okay? Some of this gets a little tricky, like on page 239. Here's 239, letter E. This is a chart to pay attention to. The call imperative of first vav verbs, like yashav and yada, those verbs that were initially first W, actually, washabu, wada, all that stuff. And as well as halak, which behaves like a first vav for some weird reason. You just get the first letter chopped off, so that if you want to do shuv, or yashav, the imperative is shave, dwell, or yada, you just say da, no, or if you want to say halak, walk along, you just say lech. Okay, God says to Abraham famously in Genesis 12, lech lecha. Lech there means get up, go. Lecha means to you, get yourself up, lech lecha, to Abraham, okay, or Avram at that point. Then there are all kinds of super complicated notes about how this can work. Oh yeah, look at the bottom of page 239. Some first noon verbs keep the noon, others lose it. So nefol, fall down, but then you get nasa, set out, and just set out on your journey, or natan, 10, okay, give. It's masculine singular. Okay. Page 240, with the hollow verbs for the command form, like kum and bo and all that stuff, the form is just the same as that lexical form. So kum is just kum, and bo is just bo, and seem is just seem. Okay. You see how that works in the feminine and then in the plurals. Okay. Sometimes, page 241, he makes a big deal about this as though it's some huge earth-shattering thing. It's not. Page 241, sometimes you get imperatives that just have a final hey on the end, kind of like the cohortative has that a on the end in the imperfect type style. Sometimes there's just a stylistic thing. It's not incredibly common, but it does occur. So like shamar, for example, shamar, keep, but you could also get shomra, keep, means the same thing, the exact same thing. Okay. Pages 242 through 244 are examples of how commands work. Okay. There are a lot of different ways to do this. I want you to read all these examples carefully. We're now in lesson 21. You should be getting good at reading these examples yourself. It should be getting a little bit faster for you to integrate these concepts, okay? Page 242, number 5, we remember one way to do commands is by using the second person imperfect, so like the Ten Commandments. Lo tirtzach, don't murder, you shall not murder. Okay. Al tismach, do not rejoice. Okay. And then he gives all kinds of examples. Imperative as interjections. Sometimes you don't translate them literally, like Genesis 27:27 there, 6a on page 242 for see. Re'eh, re'ach beni. See the smell of my son. It's more like, not like see, it's like how can you see a smell, right? It's kind of odd. It's more like you translate it as, the smell of my son, okay. Kum occurs a lot like this, Genesis 27:9. Kumna shava va'ochala va'achala, excuse me. I mean, kum means get up, arise. I mean, but you really maybe want to translate it more like, come on, sit up and eat, something like that. Okay. Come, sit, yashav there, sit or dwell, shava, there you have that hey on the end, and so on. Sometimes The imperative can be a little redundant and then used with the preposition le. Top of page 243. Oh, there's the example I just used. Genesis 12:1. Lech lecha me'artzecha. Get up. Lech from halak. Get up to yourself. Get yourself up. Okay. Genesis 27:43, right below it. Vekum barach lecha. And arise. Flee for yourself. Now go on. Flee. El Lavan achi, to Laban, my brother. Okay. Pay attention also to number 8 here, the commands in a narrative sequence. It's all kind of what you'd expect it to be, but you have to get used to seeing it, okay? So these imperatives can be tricky. You have to learn to recognize them. Look at Isaiah 55:1, 8a on page 243, Isaiah 55:1. Lechu shivru ve'echolu ulchu shivru belo kesef. A lot of command forms there. Come, from halak, but plural. Notice they're all masculine, plural. Come, buy, plural again. Shavar means purchase, so shivru, imperative, plural. Purchase and eat. And come, buy without kesef, without money. Notice that lo, the negating word lo there, is actually written with the vav, mater, for some reason there. Bello. So it looks a little strange. Read these examples and you'll get a sense of how this can work in a narrative type setting, okay? Okay. That's all for this unit. Again, a lot of details, but just get those two concepts. The jussive is actually a separate form, and we see that in the third hay and in the middle weak verbs. Okay. Otherwise, in strong verbs like katav and shamar and so on, the jussive and the imperfect look identical, but they're actually not technically identical. Okay. So bana, yivne, vayivin, and then yivin. Okay, that's how that works. And you get command forms, basically modeled after, you can think of it as being modeled after the imperfect second person forms, singular and plural, for masculine and feminine. Shemor, okay. Shema, think of the Shema. So when you see that Shava under the first letter, or if the first letters are guttural, if you see a compound Shava, you may have to ask yourself what's going on there. Maybe it's a command, okay? So practice these through the exercises.